Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another episode of Stand or Fall. I haven't done one of these in quite a long time. I believe it was May the last time I did one of these, a year ago. Sorry, not this past May. Ladies and gentlemen, the premise of Stand or Fall back then was to take an artist that did a side project from a group or a solo artist and to discuss whether or not said side project either stood the test of time or fell off the musical cliff to an untimely early death. Okay. I discussed on those episodes David Bowie with Tin Machine, Duran Duran with Arcadia, U2 with Passengers, and you know my opinion on Passengers. Anyways, we won't go there. We are back with another installment of this segment, and it's going to be a bit different this time. We have picked a year in music, namely 1985. We have picked five albums from five different genres, and we're going to discuss again whether or not these albums have indeed stood the test of time musically, or if they've fallen off the cliff to an untimely death. All right, musical cliff. So, to kick things off, I will pass, as I see on my screen, the virtual mic down to Jim Bricker, and hopefully he's still with us.
Hello. I think I'm
There we
still with
go.
you.
He's still with us. Okay, good. Inside joke, ladies and gentlemen. And he's going to
Yeah.
give us his views on our first album on the list. Take
Yeah.
it away, Jim.
Thanks. So yeah, the first album on our 1985 tour was released in November of that year, November 4th, actually. It's the second album from Sade and is called Promise. Um, so when we talked about this episode, as Armando said, we had this sort of operating principle of has it stood the test of time or has it lost their luster? Um, Promise, like I said, was the second album after the very successful Diamond Life, with Smooth Operator and Your Love Is King, and great tracks like that. And it really had the kind of almost invented a whole new genre of pop soul jazz.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they just with the her breathy vocals and the sax and the kind of grooving little Latin sort of bass underpinning everything. It really was distinctive, and there wasn't a whole lot out that sounded like that. um Promise also doesn't sound a whole lot like Diamond Life. It has a maturity. It has blossomed and grown, and it's simply not Smooth Operator version 2.0. Um, Broader arrangements and instrumentation really helped to sort of bring this album to life. Um, for you youngsters who weren't around in the pre-CD era, this album originally only had um, 9 tracks on it. The ones that were put in for the CD age, You're Not the Man and Punch Drunk, were add-ons. You're Not the Man is a fantastic ballad. I absolutely think that's one of the most gorgeous songs in Sade's catalog. And everything that you like about Diamond Life is replicated here, but it's amplified. It's got more color, it's got more timbre. The lyrics have a bit more maturity. The music, um, it doesn't seem so tentative. It's like they know what they're doing, they're confident, and it comes through in the production and the performances. It's a really great album of some upbeat tracks and ballads. In my opinion, does it stand the test of time? In other words, does this sound as nice and fresh today as it did in 1985? I really think so. I mean, there's very little about this album to me that sounds either dated from the standpoint of production or just like cliches of the time. The Sade as a band, their approach to music is just kind of rooted in, like I was saying, these things that are just immutable: jazz, Latin, soul. I mean, these aren't flash in the pan types of styles, like grunge or roller disco. And
Roller disco. Go on.
well,
I know what you
for those of
mean.
you still practicing roller disco, my hat's off to you. Um, yeah, I think this is a great album, and I would listen to it today and be darn proud of it. I think it sounds still fresh and invigorating, and every time I listen to it, it's like, darn, this is really good. And I forget how good it actually is. But so I am a full on yes. I think this does stand the test of time very well. Gentlemen, what do
Very
you think?
good. I
Is it
started
first?
listening to Sade from the first album, and so this is another one of those artists that I immediately bought this one without ever hearing anything off of it.
Hmm.
This album has one of my favorite album openers of all time.
Oh,
Is It a Crime?
Oh, please,
yeah.
yes.
Um,
Hello.
a combination of blues, of big band. It's just unbelievable. Of course, it's not as popular as The Sweetest Taboo, which was the hit off of this album.
Mhm.
But yeah, you described it very accurate. You know, it's got blues, it's light jazz, it's a pop, it's got soul. Um, I feel that even though uh, it's hard for me to be objective because I was there when it came out. I'd be curious
Hmm?
to find out how the 80s sound of this album sounds to someone now to hear it for the first time. I can't separate myself from, that period of time.
Right.
This is, I find that a lot of 80s music, there's, uh, and all of these albums, there are definite fingerprints of the 80s on this, but that could go from one extreme to the other. There's some
Mhm.
80s stuff that's just so major cringe, and then there's other that's just like uh sitting in warm scrambled eggs. It's just wonderful. It just feels so
Oh,
good
oh,
as yeah, Garfield the cat.
at okay.
Um yeah. Um so yeah, and even though in some of the songs it does have that 80s feel, it still stands up incredibly strong to me.
Hmm.
It's one of those that's unapologetically 80s. And her whole catalog I just adore.
Yeah.
I just adore. It's so smooth. It's just mm.
There's a warmth to this record, I think, just with the bass and the
Yeah.
percussion,
Oh, the
and
bass work is amazing. Yeah.
yeah, and just the I'll call it the authenticity of the brass and the woodwinds. These aren't Fairlights. This is actually guys
No.
blowing in reeds and valves,
Mhm.
and it
Yeah.
sounds really, really sharp, and I think keeps it from having that dated
I
sound.
agree.
I agree. Just to chime in there, there's an authenticity to this album and its sound, and the you can tell live instrumentation from programming. I'm sorry. There might be some programming on this album, but the tracks are stellar. I mean, the drama of Is It a Crime? Just like the build up with the horns and stuff, just forget about it. I mean,
Oh yeah,
it
fun
is
out of the gate.
beautiful. Yes, The Sweetest Taboo was, I guess, the big hit from the album, but this whole album is just beautiful. I mean, War of the Hearts, You're Not the Man, Jezebel, like that, please. I mean, it is just beautiful. It's very organic. Um, you can just imagine all the musicians in the studio just doing these in like one or two, even three takes at the most, in terms of like doing it live off the floor, with obviously, overdubs being done after, but at the same time, there is just a warmth to this album that you're right, Ken. There's a lot of crap going on in the 80s, like, or especially in 85. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with pop music, but Sade to me was always sophisticated, like above everyone else. Do you know what I mean? She was just her vocal approach, everything. It's amazing. And the tracks that you say that were put in as add-ons like afterwards, like come on, like I mean Punch Drunk as an instrumental,
Yeah.
please, please.
Yeah, it's weird because when it originally came out on LP, it had the
Mhm.
9 songs, but CD, which I think was released simultaneously, had the 11. So or it came out, shortly thereafter. I remember buying the LP and then shortly after that, seeing the CD, I'm like, there's more songs on here. What is this? And so
Yeah, yeah. No, it's just
early, early adventures in double dipping.
Yes.
it's amazing. Yeah, I do feel that this album has stood the test of time. Like it still stands up today. And if this is what made it onto the album, aside from the other two, from the two tracks, Punch Drunk and You're Not the Man, can you imagine what was left on the cutting room floor? Like, come on. Just
Yeah.
amazing. Amazing. All right. On to Ken for number two.
Okay. Um, debut album from one of the most highly regarded musicians at the time. And we're talking about Sting and his album Dream of the Blue Turtles. Um, I remember first hearing songs off of this album on the Light Jazz station out of Tampa, Florida. And I wouldn't have known it was Sting except for his voice is very noticeable. It's very identifiable.
Mhm.
Um, to say this album was a success is an understatement. 10 songs on this album, 6 of those 10 were released as singles. It's almost like he released the greatest hits right out of the bat.
Yeah.
Um, it is definitely in jazz rock vein, for one of a better categorization. I mean, he pulls in musicians, including Branford Marsalis on saxes, just to give it that, you know, just that flavor. Um, it's about as far away from Police as you can get, at least the early albums. You can see a progression from the last Police album, um, but it's its own thing. It definitely does have 80s production values, but um, but not in a bad way. And in many ways, I find that revisiting the album now, after being away from it for a long time, I kind of have a new appreciation for it. Even though I guess I didn't listen to it intentionally a lot back then because so much of it was being played on the radio where I was.
Yeah,
It's
this
like,
album was
you
all
know,
over the
you know,
place. Yeah.
yeah, why buy the cow? I'm getting the milk for free. So, but anyway,
Interesting.
yeah, the yeah, um,
Yeah.
it's light jazz, it's jazz rock, it's whatever. It's Sting really, going down a complete different path, and one in which he did very well. And um, I never I never idolized Sting when he was with the Police, especially when I would read all the stuff going on in the band at the time. But this one gave me a new appreciation for him as a musician, regardless of personality. And it also has just a huge nostalgia factor for me. So yeah, I can't be completely objective because it does, it stood the test of time because I was there. Yeah.
We all were.
I'm trying to think of the right phrasing on this. There's something about this album though that seems really, really 80s. And I think it's rock star as savior of the world. Here he is talking about, oh, what everyone had to go through in World War One. Oh, what the coal miners had to go through. Oh,
That's
if the
true.
Russians only loved their children too. I mean, they're taking on these weighty kind of topics, which, that's fine. Weighty topics are fine to take on, but it just gets just a little bit, all right, you don't have to pontificate quite so loudly. I can go to church for that and don't really, want that on my Sting albums necessarily all the time.
Good
Now,
point.
having said that,
Mm.
from an audio standpoint, the two things that really grated at me as 80s were the processing on Sting's vocals and the keyboard sounds are just very much like, you know, take the Yamaha out of the box, plug it in, and those are the pre-programmed sounds that came with it. There's not a lot of creativity there. The creativity on this album, though, comes
Mhm.
from the musicians. I mean, Sting and Branford picked the backing band, which is Omar Hakim on drums, Daryl Jones on bass, and Kenny Kirkland on piano, and they're
Mhm.
killing it. I mean, that Children's Crusade and Shadows in the Rain, that just light that on fire. That the middle break in Children's Crusade is just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that music, the quality of the musicianship raises it above kind of standard 80s fare, but I think there still is an element of this that sounds 80s in terms of, like I said, the rock star as Messiah thing, and then some of those production techniques. In the songs, how can you not sing along with Love is the Seventh Wave? Fortress Around Your Heart, another brilliantly conceived song. I think Sting might have missed the mark, just a little bit in the execution, but I love the sentiment of that song. I just think it's very, very mature and stands the test of time.
True.
Um,
True.
okay, what to add to that?
Did I steal your thunder? I didn't mean to.
No, 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 no. Of course you didn't. You never do. It's fine. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Uh, ladies and gentlemen, good night. No.
Yes.
What to say about this album? Again, massive hit for Sting. He was all over the place at this point. He was on, No Jacket Required. He was on So Red the Rose from Arcadia. He, you know, had
Live Aid, Brothers in
Live
Arms.
Aid and
Yeah.
um he made there was a big discussion about if you love someone, set them free, if somebody set them free. Uh, that was the response to Every Breath You Take, you know, because although he wrote that, this was the reaction to it, like he hated that Every Breath You Take after the fact, that because of the sentiment of the song, like being controlled and being watched and surveyed and stuff. Um, I agree with Jim. I do like the production on this album. This is very much a jazz flavored album with pop flourishes, you know, overall. The performances, when you've got, Omar Hakim on drums and Daryl Jones and Branford Marsalis, like, come on. Like this is stellar. I mean, musicianship. Um, do the songs stand up? Russians, just for the subject matter, sounds very dated.
Yes.
Okay. Even though it's, a well-crafted track, it does sound very dated. And I do believe that he, along with, forgive me for this, Ken, but along with Bono, pushed the envelope slightly when it came to sounding preachy in terms of
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I
political
agree.
views and stuff. Um, there was a quick sidebar. There was a concert that you two were performing at. They were doing a tour, and at one of the shows, uh, Bono snapped his fingers at one point. He said, every time we do this, a child is starving or a child dies of starvation." And somebody yelled out at one point, well, stop doing that then. You know, like because they didn't want to hear it anymore. I mean, there's a fine line you got to walk when you do stuff like this,
I
you know.
agree.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
did he teeter over the line? Slightly.
No,
Very.
he did.
Oh, he okay. Like, then he fell over the line. I mean, it is a good album. I do like Fortress Around Your Heart. This, Love is the Seventh Wave as a reggae tinged track. Great. I do like that. Um, it is a good album. There is still there is 80s production on it, that the trappings of 80s production on it, I should say.
Yeah.
But it's a hell of a lot better than a lot of the schlock that came out at that point in the 80s, the Lindrum programming and the whole bit.
No.
This does not fall into that trap. But yeah, I would say it has stood the test of time, but I'm guarded when I say that. I'm
Yep.
guarded. I'm guarded when I say that. So, but we must carry on. ladies and
Agreed.
gentlemen. So
I'd still rather listen to this than like any of Sting's like last 2 or 3 solo records that he's released in the last decade.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would agree. I would agree. All right, number 3 on the list here. Hopefully, we have the same list in order, or I can just
We can wing it.
I can
Yeah.
scroll up and down. We are going to look at Little Creatures from Talking Heads, released June 10th, 1985. And by the way, a little side note, the deluxe version of Stop Making Sense, July 26th. Get it. Mine's on the way. Anyways, plug there. um,
Click the affiliate link below.
Yeah.
what was that? Sorry, what was that? What, I didn't
Click on the
hear.
link in the
Any-
comments. Yeah.
Yes.
Any
There we
yeah,
go.
any purchase you make from Amazon may put a few pennies in my coffer. Click the
We won't
affiliate
go that
link
far.
below.
We won't go that far.
Okay.
I digress. Okay, we'll go on. Again, Little Creatures, released again June 10th, 1985. I remember when this album came out, and I knew of Talking Heads from, again, Take Me to the River, Burning Down the House. At this point for me, David Byrne's vocals for me were a bit sort of I don't want to say odd, but he had a certain approach with his vocal style and the music he wrote. I mean, good album, pop filled out, like very much a pop album. With the singles, and She Was, and Road to Nowhere, and which is the last track on the album, and which that video was played very heavily on Much Music, and I would imagine MTV. This album has to, although I am looking forward to watching Stop Making Sense and listening to that, this album for me overall does have to grow on me a little more in terms of listening to it, in terms of getting into it. Although at this point, Talking Heads were quite in the public eye, they were quite popular, and I mean, this album sold 2 million copies in the States alone. So this was their, I guess for them, in terms of sales wise, their pinnacle. But I mean, I do like Road to Nowhere. I like the rhythm of that track, just the rhythm section. The rest of it does have to grow on me just a bit. Sorry to
But
say.
does it sound drenched in 1985 to you?
Not overly so. I don't feel.
I know I don't feel that way either. I think it's kind of like what we were talking about for Sting. There's like little things in there, little clues that give you a hint to what time frame it was done in. But as far as, again, the instrumentation and the topics of the songs, I mean, this pretty much could have been released last week.
This
I
could have
think,
come out. Yeah, I was going to say this could
Yeah.
have come out this year, and it sounds relevant musically.
yeah,
What I'll amend what I said, and then I'll pass the mic over. Musically, with the arrangements and the production, it sounds relevant to today. It still does. Like it holds up. I'm just saying, uh, David Byrne's vocals still and his phrasing still, that part has to still grow on me a little bit. If that
yeah.
makes any sense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sure does.
You had an amazing band with, Tina Weymouth and, Chris Frantz and Jerry Harrison. Like, come on. It couldn't have better musicians. But yeah. Yeah. No.
Yeah, of the 5 albums we're talking about on this video, this is the most timeless sounding.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The only way that I know that it came out in 85 was because I bought it and listened to it in 85. There again, I can't be objective to that. It's not my favorite. I find I go back to the first 3 albums more than I do this one. Um, I felt back then their sound was more cohesive as a band. It's like everybody was equal. As you got into later Talking Heads, it was almost like the rest of the band was a backing band
I was
to
gonna say that.
Almost.
David Byrne. Yeah.
I was gonna say that.
But yeah, at the time I played the heck out of it, but for me, it just it hadn't aged as well. Because it wasn't one of my favorites to begin with, probably.
My closing comment is there's a definite difference between this album and say even Burning Down the House as a track, as a singular
Oh,
track.
yeah.
Definite difference.
I don't think anyone could have predicted that they would kind of turn a road towards Americana and country
Yeah.
after, Remain in Light and Speaking in Tongues. It's kind of like, huh, that was an interesting choice, but they were probably wanting to do something different. The artsy side of them was like, we don't want to repeat ourselves.
Yeah.
What can we do that shakes things up a little bit?
Yeah.
Mhm.
True enough. True enough.
Yeah. I think, to me, there's some of the keyboard sounds in here, again, that make it sound dated, especially the keyboard sound in The Lady Don't Mind. It just sounds, again, very take the Yamaha out of the box, plug it in.
Yeah.
But
With
I
a
think a lot
preset.
of yeah, yeah. A lot of what they're doing in here, though, with the steel guitars and the slide, kind of makes up for it. It helps give it a sound outside of 85.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep.
Agree.
Again, having said that, I am looking forward to Stop Making Sense coming out. I am looking forward to diving into that SOB right like when it comes out because it looks very interesting to me.
It's phenomenal. We could spend an entire episode talking about Stop Making Sense.
Which we will
Hint, hint.
eventually. So surprise. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to the next one on our list. Number 4. Phil Collins, No Jacket Required. Oh boy.
Who do you want to take the bullet?
I believe it's Ken's turn, or is it my turn?
It's
Or
Jimmy's. No, it's Jimmy's turn.
It's me.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Let's get some things out of the way.
Yes.
Oh my Lord, does this sound 1980s? I listened to it this
Yes.
weekend and oh,
Yep.
it's just so bad from that standpoint. It's just so
Yep.
cliche, but yet it sold a gajillion copies.
5 million.
It made Phil Collins even more of a household name. This was the beginning of, his downfall for me, but that's just me. I and I think part of the downfall for me is it's just tied to the fact that he became so ubiquitous, especially around, 85, when you've got this was out, he was on the tour, he did the two Live Aid shows, one in London, one in New York on the same day.
But which he got
Um,
blasted for by Led Zeppelin.
yes, yes.
Okay.
And then, then of course Invisible Touch and things went on from there.
Yeah.
Um, but I tried to sort of take a step back from this and say, okay, is it really that bad? If you take the production stuff out of it, and you take, the guys who were around in 1985 and try to sort of bring a little bit of objectivity into it, like, let me take a quick look at the track list. You know, some songs I think still stand the test of time as, I'll say, as compositions. I think Long, Long Way to Go, One More Night, Inside Out, and Take Me Home kind of, they stand as fine songs on their own. They may have this whole crappy 85 sheen and sheer to them, but as far as enjoying them just as songs, I was actually able to do that. Just take myself out of the Phil Collins bias that had sort of, we were all victim to in the mid 80s. And I found myself, enjoying them. They were good. I could enjoy where they were going. But, that's four tracks out of the 11 that were on the CD and that are on most streaming services. The other ones, they're just not really good songs. There's like some good elements here and there, but with the overbearing drive to sound like Prince and just the production techniques in the studio at that time, this album just kind of crumbles under that weight. And it just does not, it has lost its luster. It was so lustrous, if that's a word, back in 85. It has nothing left to give off anymore. It's like all its flaws are exposed. Um, yeah, like from 81 to 84, I was a really big Phil Collins and Genesis fan. Um, but this was the beginning of the downhill slide for me. This does not stand the test of time for me. Having said that, I would love it if a competent musician could take those like four songs that I mentioned, give them a more timeless arrangement that isn't so just locked into a specific era. I might find myself enjoying those specific songs, but as a whole, no jacket required. Yeah.
So are
Nope.
you saying you don't have Sussudio as your wake up alarm call?
I don't. Whenever you text me though, that's when Sussudio goes off.
Okay. Wow.
Just say the
Yeah,
word.
for me, it is so incredibly 80s sounding. It's for me, it's too heavy on the synths.
Yeah.
Um, to me, this is the audio version of a chick flick. Uh, for me, where
Ooh.
I was, the singles were played to death on,
Yeah.
whether it be television or radio. It's just you just couldn't get away from it.
Right.
And uh, I, th yeah, he lost me on this one too. I
Hmm.
don't, I don't think it was a long time before I bought any of his solo stuff after this. This is the only way that this could stand the test of time for someone is if they've always loved the album and never tired of it. It is so incredibly 80s, it's not good to
Yeah.
any, anymore. And I don't think even if someone did take the songs and rework it. I would have trouble listening to it because I still have that ghost of the original in my head
Yeah,
Sure.
that I couldn't.
definitely.
There again, it'd be hard to be objective hearing the new unless they did something totally different. You
Yeah,
know,
and then maybe they pull a Todd Rundgren with a twist and they just
yeah,
radically rearranged things.
put it in a reggae mode or something. Yeah,
There you go. I could hear you only you know and I know as kind of a reggae tune. Really. I think it would lend itself to that.
yeah.
My opinion on this, what was he thinking? I mean, don't get me wrong. I, you know, bopped along, nodded my head and got into Susudio when it came out. And, as most 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds did at that time, if you liked what was on the radio and what was on the music video channels at the time. Um, no, it does not stand up. I mean, the songs all sound the same pretty much in terms of horn stabs and arrangements. And Hugh Padgham helped produce this album for a producer who said in an interview that, when you stand close to a drummer and he's playing, it is so bloody loud. And that's what was missing from the Genesis albums at the time when he started working with the band. What in the hell were you thinking? I mean, come on. I mean, you've got, even with Collins, he had Chester Thompson as a drummer. You didn't use him. You used a drum machine. You know what I mean? On the majority of the tracks. It it just doesn't stand the test of time. I mean, I bought this album when I was on a school trip. I told Jim this story. When I went on a school trip to Ottawa, anywhere where there was a mall and a record store, my ass was in that store. And I bought this along with Foreigner's Asian Provocateur.
Mm.
Okay. That album worked better than this. I'm sorry. The production on it. No, I'm not sorry, because this album sucks. The production on it is dated. Aside from Susudio being a good dance track in terms of the dance oriented part of it, the sounds on it, the use of horns, synth horns, and he was still using the Phoenix horns, I believe, at this point. Why
Right.
would Daryl Sternberg give up songs for this album? Why? Why not use it for your own release, or give them to someone else like Jean-Luc Ponty that you used to play with, and just maybe do something different with it? Do you know what I mean? It's just, this album does not stand the test of time. Like I said in our Genesis video, Face Value was up here. Then you have Hello, I Must Be Going. And then you had at the bottom of the barrel, the scrape in the bottom of the ocean, you have No Jacket Required. I'm sorry. It's just and he never really recovered for me after that. I'm sorry.
Sure. Sure.
I think
Now
what
I
they were
will
thinking, I think what they were thinking was, okay, this formula has worked well. Let's try to milk one more out of it and take it even a couple of steps farther.
You know what's missing for me with this album? The human element.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no authenticity to it.
Well, that's what makes the sax solo in One More Night so welcome to me, is that it doesn't sound like a machine. There's, you can hear a very, very good sax player just bringing his game on that solo.
Mhm.
But, that's not enough to save the entire album. But yeah, the majority of this is just very, it's all very programmed.
Very pedestrian.
Mhm.
Now, I will say though that I did see this tour because I wanted to go see just Phil live. I'd seen Genesis and I wanted to see Phil. He put on a heck of a show. I mean, it was a fantastic 2.5 hour show. And, you know, aside from like some of the more obscure cuts from Face Value, he played just about everything that I would want. And, you know, at that time, he didn't become so ubiquitous with these, you know, film soundtracks and singles that came from them. Really, the only one of those that appeared was Against All Odds, which is phenomenal song.
Mhm.
Absolutely, you know, drop dead phenomenal. And a
And
lot of that has to go back to R.F. Martin, who produced it, and the fact that Phil wrote it during the, you know, Face Value demos.
yeah, yeah.
So, you know, the song had an emotional gut and a pedigree to it that just worked. And it was so disappointing for me to go from, you know, that single that literally I had to stop in the car and drive to the side of the road to finish hearing the song because I was just so taken by what I was hearing, to, you know, Susudio. It's like, oh, the transformation is complete. You know?
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, to ask the $65,000 question, has this album stood the test of time, or has it fallen off the musical cliff to its untimely death?
It's like the coyote with an Acme
After the
anvil.
Roadrunner, yeah, yeah,
That's right. With the anvil coming quickly thereafter. Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Okay, all right.
Asked and answered.
I didn't mean to go on. I didn't know what to else to say, like anything that was positive. I mean, even before I
There's
listened
not,
to
I tried to say something positive about the record.
the only thing positive about it was that it ended at some point. I mean,
Hey.
I'm sorry. I mean, you know, stick around, folks. I'm here till 9 o'clock. You know, I mean, it's just it's no, no.
Yep.
I'm sorry, and it's
What does Amy Winehouse say?
no, no, no. I mean, it's just it's
Okay.
like,
All right.
anyways. Um, we must carry on, ladies and gentlemen. Our last selection in our list of five, Mr. Brian Ferry with Boys and Girls, released June 3rd of 1985. What is interesting of this list is that majority of these albums were released around within about a week to 10 days of one another.
Yeah, I think Blue Turtles, Little Creatures, and Boys and Girls were all in the same time. I think No Jacket was like February of
Yeah,
85.
February 10th, and yeah, three of the five. No, but yeah. So uh who wants to take this one? Because I've got my opinion, but
I think Ken gets to start.
Okie dokie. Um, on a previous video, I had spoken about my love for Roxy Music's Avalon and how I was disappointed that there were no more albums to follow that. But this is a spiritual successor. It came out 2 years after Avalon, and I think in many ways it would be hard for the casual listener to be able to separate the sounds of the two. One of the big differences is he Ferry hired the best musicians to back him up
Yes.
on this album. Nile Rodgers, David Gilmour, Tony Levin, David Sanborn, Mark
bloody
Knopfler,
hell. Yeah.
and on and on and on.
Marcus Miller,
Um,
Omar Hakim.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Ooh.
And yet it still had um, that same flavor that Avalon had that I loved so much. Just a little bit, the soundscape was just a little bit expanded in some ways, but it's not
Hmm.
drastically different. So it held that same quality, that same character that Avalon had. It is very 80s sounding, but for me, being like I said, a huge fan with, you know, Sensation, Slave to Love, Don't Stop the Dance. Um, uh, it definitely, uh, it still remains one of my favorite. I still think of it kind of as a Roxy Music album, but
Mhm.
I still love it to this day. And I've shucked out for I don't remember how much money to buy uh the SACDs of this album and Avalon with the 5.1 surround mix. And it's just it's perfection for the ears for me. So this one definitely does it stays true. It stays true for me.
I have a question for you, Ken, before I give my, I'll let Jim go first. But my question is, would would this album to you, in your opinion, benefit from a Stephen Wilson remix?
Knowing Steven Wilson has surprised me many times in his remixes.
Okay.
Albums that I think, wow, that sounds pretty perfect the way it is. Yet he always brings something, new to it. Um, I can't imagine that it would. I think he always brings, the A plus to an A plus plus,
Okay. Yeah.
at the soundboard. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I think, if Wilson tackled like a Dolby Atmos mix, that would probably be where his ears and his skills would really come into place. But I can't see much that he would do with Boys and Girls from just a plain old two-channel stereo perspective that would bring much more out of it. Because it's just,
Oh yeah.
like Ken was saying, it's a spiritual cousin to Avalon, and that sound is just, drop dead perfect. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you've got, from a technical standpoint, you've got Rhett Davies, Bob Clearmountain, and Neil Dorsman, all on board again
Mhm.
from their time on Avalon. Um, I mean, it's an amazing sounding record, and to me, Ken, I don't know, did you give your thumbs up or thumbs down of does it stand the test of time?
Yeah. I'll
Yeah,
give
yeah,
two
Oh yeah.
thumbs
Oh
up.
yeah. Two thumbs
two
up.
thumbs. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the stuff that's in here is, if it's 80s, it's so subtle that it kind of it transcends the stereotypes. Again, because it's got that same DNA as Avalon, and in one degree, there may not be an album that sounds as beautifully 80s as Avalon does. But that doesn't make it sound dated. I mean, you can put that sucker on today and it's just fresh and gorgeous.
Mhm.
Um,
Well,
so yeah,
and you've touched on one point with several of the previous albums we talked about, that Yamaha keyboard right out of the box. This doesn't have that. To me,
right.
that, the Phil Collins sitting down at at the electric piano. To me, I associate that so much with the 80s that it drives me nuts. But
Yeah.
this is drenched in that. And I'm really having a hard time even thinking which tracks have it at all. Um,
Yeah, they're
and
they're
he
just
uses
there
the
for
saxophone in
color.
the same way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the use of synthesizers are not overdone.
Right.
They make for the atmosphere. They use the saxophone and stuff like that to just the way they did in Avalon, just to enhance what was there. And um, and one would be tricky to even pick out where's Dave Gilmour, where's Mark Knopfler, because they're not doing their Dave Gilmour Mark Knopfler thing.
Yeah.
Um, they are. utilized and played within the style of the Brian Ferry and the producers, which I think is brilliant, because otherwise they would stand out and
Right.
it wouldn't be Brian Ferry anymore. So
Hmm.
yeah. So yeah.
My 2 cents, and it will be 2 cents, not 10, I promise. Um, there's an authenticity to this album, much like there is with Avalon. Um,
Hmm.
I think so.
even okay, even though yes, it's you know the you know the production techniques that were around in '85, a lot of there was a lot of use of keyboards and drum machines, etc. To me, this has none of that. This album, and even if they did use programming, it's used very subtly. It's not used
Right.
overtly. And this album, even if it was, for example, a large majority of it was programmed, it still could be played live.
Yes.
That is the trick,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Where you can, put as many programming elements on a track, but if you can still play it live, you're off and running.
Mhm.
Right.
There is a sophistication to this album, much like there is with Avalon. There's a sensuality to
Yeah.
this album, okay,
Oh yeah.
for lack of a better term. Not even, I don't mean it in a corny way, but there is a sensual element to this album that the only other album that would have it in this list is Promise. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Um, and I was gonna say Brian May, God help me. Brian Ferry's vocals are very ethereal, almost very effortless. It's like it's like a warm rush of air coming in the room. That's how he does his vocal delivery.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's like literally after this album, you want to smoke a pack of cigarettes. It's that good and it's that mesmerizing to me, you know.
Hmm.
Um, and the people he has working on this album, Nile Rodgers, David Gilmour, like you said, even I forget his name, the guitarist from Brian Adams' band, contributes to this album. Omar
Hmm.
Hakim, like I believe his name is Jamie, the individual that is was in Brian Adams' band at the time. Um, Omar Hakim on drums, like, come on, Mark Knopfler, like, please. I mean, and you're right, Ken, even though he's got Gilmore on here and Knopfler and Rogers on here doing their bit, it's still a Brian Ferry album. He
Yeah.
utilizes them to the best of his ability, not so much their ability, but to the best of his ability, to knowing what to bring out in the mix and what to leave off. You know what I mean? This is an album that it to me is timeless. It is so good. It is timeless and it is still relevant. It's still relevant.
Hard to fail using Avalon as a sonic template to draw
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This could be Avalon Part 2.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if he even thought about naming this album Avalon Part 2. Do you know what I mean? It is such a I don't want to say that, the corny phrase or the term progression, but it's such a natural next step from what they did on Avalon to this. It's like it's effortless. It's
Hmm.
effortless. It sounds very much. Do you two remember the band China Crisis?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Very much like China Crisis in that respect. Um, but he just took it to a whole new level, Brian Ferry, and his overall the packaging of the way he is, like his vocal delivery. There's a sophistication in his overall presence and his overall
Yeah.
delivery that isn't there in that wasn't there, sorry, in what was out in 85, with the exception of Promise. No
Well,
Jacket
and I think
Required.
that's
I mean, sorry.
yeah, and that's a good comparison too, because both Promise and Boys and Girls are the perfect albums to play when you've invited a young lady to your dorm room. You know, I mean, just to, yeah, instead of Netflix and chill, yeah, you do these,
Yep.
these two albums and chill. It's great for that. It's just wonderful.
This is one of those albums, along with Promise, along with, many others, that you can sit down and listen to and look at the lyrics and just chill and just enjoy from start to finish.
Yep, 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 yep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this episode of Stand or Fall. 5 albums from 1985 that have either stood the test of time, or as I've always put it, fallen off the musical cliff to their untimely death. And I've enjoyed this episode immensely with my 2 cohorts here. Please put in the comments down below an album from any year, any time frame that you think has stood the test of time, or again has fallen off the proverbial musical cliff to its untimely death. No right or wrong answers, just opinion. I want to thank Jim and Ken for joining me on this interesting musical adventure, and we will be back very soon with more videos. Just to let you guys know, I will be doing a video with Bill Schuster and his wife Stacy. We'll be talking about Joe Jackson, an album review of What a Racket, and their experience at the concert that they went to see of the tour. And that's going to be filmed on Wednesday. That's coming up in next week. So you'll see it very soon. So for Ken Cheshire and Jim Bricker, I'm Armando Venditti signing off for the last time today because it's been a long day. We will see you soon with another video. Bye for now.